Yeah, I think we finished with Pesach.
Yeah, well, this is only number two.
It's the last volume, I think.
No, it's three.
You have another volume? Okay, so we are up to the Mishnah and the Pei Aleph Omid Aleph. Mishin is Chayiv V'shtei Misas Best. Someone who did two Averis. He did, let's say, he was Mechala Shabbos, it was Mechayiv Neskila, and he was Mizana with Neshish, which is Mechayiv and Mechanek. So how do they pass him for him? Nida and Bechamur. He gets the Skila. That's the logical one to get. What about over Averish Neschayiv Shtei Misas? For instance, he was Baal Chamoisai. That's also Neshish. So the same woman who he was Mizana with is Mechayiv and Sreifa, as well as Chenek. So again, Nida and Bechamur. You get the misa that comes first, and the Gemara will explain what that is. I don't understand. This is a chiddush of a Mishnah that you have. If you have two misas on you, you get the machamer one. But would you expect that since he was chayiv twice, he should get a break? Screw he should benefit from that he was over two affairs. For that case, it's not a chiddush at all. Our Mishnah is telling you even a different chiddush. Which over Aveira Kal. He was over a Chiev Chenek. Let's say he was Mazana with Neshish. And then the Nigmardina, they took him to Bezdin and they passed him that he's a dead man walking. He's now Chayiv Chenek. And before they had a chance to kill him, the Chazer V'avar Aveira Chamur. And then he was over in Aveira Chamur, that's Mechayiv Meskila. So do we even engage in passing him for Skila? So Gedada Chamino, Kivan and Nigmardina La Aveira Kala. Hi Gavra Katilahu. He's a dead man walking. There's no reason to even engage in the second Avera. Kamash Valon, that you do engage in the second Avera, and that's the Chiddush that the Mishnah is trying to tell us. So Frektosh is a bomb b'dika kasha. A bomb b'dika kasha. V'amai, Frektosh v'amai nidin b'chamura. Why would you give him the more chamur one? The second set of Eidim that came to be Mechayiv him for the second Avera, they're Eidish yet Yochal Azima. Because even if you're Mazim them, they wouldn't get a Chiv Misa, because they'll say he was dead anyway. Right? So how is it possible that there should be a relevant second din on him? The imitzimi sahadi basroi lo mikli wouldn't kill them. Even the belav sadu sayu gaver bar katolo who can muchav berchama de makos kabe boshnaim rabba bechad b'shava nigmar dina shalplani. He's like a traper. He's a dead man walking. The shloimar. We learned there's a certain time you don't need to aid him if he did it right in front of Bezdin. So the Shleimer will be negeda chamari going to hachaver shnia of our bifnei bezdin, and therefore the afilu beidi shed yochal azima mechayvin lalil betrefa mishum we arta rami kabecha. That's the kill. We oide Shleimer, but there's another thing you could say that maybe they're yochal azima because they can't tell you. Well, no, we killed a dead man. You didn't kill a dead man. And how do you know that verdict wouldn't have been overturned? Maybe they would have been musam. Maybe they would have been hukash. So even the mitzvah mikamoy or mitzkachshi mahani sadusai de basroyim, that's enough to call it a edish hatayochal azim. Okay, so that's that Gemara. So Zok to Gemara, the boy minei avud Rabbi Yosef bar Chamo may Rabba bar Nosa. We know Milsa. Where do we know this halacha from? The Amar Rabbanon, that Rabbanon told us that Mishin is chayiv shtei misas bezdin nidmin chamur. So of course we're asking for the Chiddush case where he's already a dead man walking because the Gemara already said Pshita. Zok to Gemara, I'll tell you how we know. So before we do the Gemara inside, the Gemara is going to talk about several psukim. The Gemara deals with them out of order, so let's learn them in order. So I'm looking here now at the Gimel, and Yechezkel Hanavi was trying to reinforce to Klal Yisrael that we're never going to punish a father for a son's affairs or a son for a father's affairs. Unless the son follows in his father's way, then he'll get punished for his father's affairs. But if he's an Erlich HaMensch, you don't get punished for anybody else's affairs. So the Navi was talking about a good guy. And it says, El HaHarim Lo Yachal. He didn't even the Harim, I think it refers to Takrubas Avodah Zarah. The Einav Lo Nasa El Gelule Beis Yisrael. And he didn't look towards Avodah Zarah. So he's a pretty good guy. He doesn't eat Takrubas Avodah Zarah. He doesn't din Avodah Zarah. And he doesn't violate his friend's wife. And he never had relations with the wife Anida. This guy's a tzaddik yisod olam. He never did these horrible affairs. Then goes up the pasuk Viter. Now I'm going to Aleph, and that's what the Gemara is going to start with. V'hoylid ben paritz shoyfech dam. And who did this tzaddik have as a child? He had a ben paritz a shoyfech dam. He had a son, a murderer. V'also es. He did to his brothers one of these things. like kill him or like violate his wife, and so on and so forth. The father didn't do any of these affairs. Kigam elaharim ochal the son of Russia, the Zara, Ves Eshish Re'eu Time, Oni ve'evyoin Haina, he tortured and tormented and Oni ve'evyoin, Gezelas Gozal, he stole, Chavoy lo Yoshev, and he lent somebody money and took a mashkin, he didn't give the mashkin back, Vel Agalulim Nasa Einav, and he did Avodah Zarah, To'eva also did a To'eva. You know what else he did? The Neshach Nosan, he lent money for ribis, for tarbis, Lokach, and he took tarbis. You know what's going to happen to him? V'choy lo yichya. He is not going to live. Because it's kol ha'to'eva yisa'elu asa, and moishumos domov boyiyah. So we're talking over here about a whole series of violations relevant to our sugya. Because what if someone is over many averos? Which misa does he get? So let's have a look at how the Gemara darshans. Tichsiv ha'hoylid ben porit shoyfech dam, elaharim ochal, ves eshes for eutime, vela galulam nasa enov, v'hoylid ben porit shoyfech dam. Oh, so I'm sorry, period. V'hoylid is going back to the beginning of the pasuk. V'hoylid, this man, this erlich yid, gave birth to a ben porit shoyfech dam. If he's a shoyfech dam, what is his misa? Saif, right? Okay. So the first aver he did, got him saif. As eshes for eutime, zu eshes bechenek. Now he's chayiv chenek as well. Vela galulam nasa enov, zu avodah kachavim beskila. Now he's chayiv skila as well. Now what misa did he get? He violated 3 averes. What misa did he get? Moisumas dam of boy. Dam of boy is the code word for skila. Dam of boy, which is beskila. So you have a kloraya that when someone is over multiple averes and has multiple chiv misos, he gets the chamura. It's interesting. I don't know how this is going to work according to Reb Shimon. Well, it's Reivas chamura. It's Reivas chamura. And I thought he was on the list here. Oh, it's not fair. It works out perfectly because amongst these averes, skila is still chamura. So even according to Reb Shimon, because there's no violation of shreifa in this pasuk, so he's still chamura. Yeah. So Maskav V'lo Rab Nachman Bar Yitzchak. How do you know that you understand what these violations were, and you're assuming they're different misas? I'm going to show you it's possible that all these violations are referring to chiyuvei skila. So then it's not a question of multiple violations. Going to Eddie Klein is what she wants to know where we are, what channel we're on. Let me just tell you, we're on 1948. Six oh three. Okay. Zok to Gemara. Matzka v'lo Rab Nachman Yitzchak ema kulu b'skila. Maybe they're all b'skila. And now let's dash from the pasuk again. V'hoyled ben paritz is shoyfech dam. Now that pasha is a sayif, but no, maybe it's a ben tzara moira. Maybe we're talking about a ben tzara moira, the b'skila. So that's the first violation was a skila. Ejish re'eu time, maybe zunayir hamil rasa. Because the ben tzara moira is nidon shem soifer that he killed. So, v'hoyled ben paritz shoyfech dam is referring to ben tzara moira. Instead of a regular murder, it's referring to ben tzara moira who gets skila. Ejish re'eu time. It might not be speaking about a regular issues. It might be speaking about an Aimer Rosh of the Beskila. So how do you know that we're talking about multiple misais? What chiddush is Yecheskel trying to tell us? By listing off these things, we are assuming that it must be that he's trying to tell us which one, which misa he gets when there's multiple misas. He's trying to actually address directly our sugya. In fact, now who said? Maybe Dilma Torah Kamahader. Maybe Yecheskel is just trying to review the halachas of the Torah. Zokt Gemara, that's not how one reviews halachas of the Torah. If you want to know how one reviews the halachas of the Torah, look at Moshe Rabbeinu and how he reviewed the halachas of the Torah in Sefer Devarim. And how was that? That was by listing off the halachas properly, not saying some story where it's just referred to and it's not crystal clear. If you want to chazer it over, you got to chazer it over crystal clear. Okay, now we're going to go back to the beginning of the pasuk. Dorish Rabacha Bar Chanina. My dichsiv elaharim lo yochel. What do you mean elaharim lo yochel? We're trying to talk about this great tzaddik who the Torah says about him, the Novi says about him, choya yichya. What's the what he do? He didn't do avodah zarah. He didn't violate his friend's wife. I mean, I'm very proud of him. He didn't do that, but that doesn't make him great. He just didn't do anything bad. So the pasuk must be referring to something else, which in fact is greatness, is
real there. That's okay.
Zok to Gemara,
I don't want it on the air.
Zok the Gemara, El Haharim Loy Achal means Shaloi Achal B'Schus Avoisa. Everything that he had, he didn't need to rely on the schus of his father. He was a zoicha because he was a tzaddik on his own, and he was zoicha to all of the wonderful things that he had because of his own schuyos. That's already somebody who's a kavarabba, right? The einov loy nosal galulei basis role. What does it mean? It doesn't mean literally avodah zarah. It means shalai halach b'kayim eskufa. He didn't walk with his head up high. He walked with humility. So he was a person who was an onav. That's another very very fine attribute. It doesn't literally mean that. It means he didn't go to try to destroy his friend's parnasa. He didn't try to destroy his friend's parnasa. So these are all things that show that he's a very fine person. It doesn't mean literally that. It means even when he needed tzedakah, he refrained from taking tzedakah. That's also a very admirable trait. So maybe that's what it's referred to, and therefore it makes sense why such a person should be because he did all these wonderful things. So Kishahaya Rabbi Gamliel Magia Mikrazeh, when Rabbi Gamliel reached this pasuk, he would cry because the standards to be considered a tzaddik and Chaya Yichya means you have to do all these things. That's a very big demand on people. He asked, Boichi would cry, what if somebody was very careful not to be Yord L'Mnus Chaveroi? But he didn't, but he had to rely on the Chosovos. Yeah. Is that such a bad thing? He's still a good guy. Amalei Rebbe Kiva, don't worry about it. Let's look at when the Torah talks about bad things, and I'll show you that the Torah means only one of the list. Because El Mayata, the end of Kedoshim, when the Torah lists off all of the rayas, it says, Al Titamu B'chol Leila. So what are you going to learn pshat? When the Torah says, I don't mind if you do some of their rayas, as long as you don't do them all. Avada, that's not what it means. Hachanami b'chulu in b'chadim minayaloi. Avada not. If you do any one of these things, it's a violation. Hachanami, when you're talking about who's the tzaddik, it's ba'achas mikolayla. Any one of these midas toivos, any one of these wonderful attributes that someone has, is in and of itself a reason to say that he's a tzaddik and chaya yichid. Over avera. So now we're going to delve into Rabbi Yosy, who said you don't look at the most chamidik avera, you look at the first avera.
Nice to understand that tzaddik who played the yichid is the pasuk before.
That's right. Right, that's talking about the father. He's a good guy. That's right. So Zok to Gemara, let's talk a little bit about Rabbi Yosy. If Rabbi Yosy holds, ain iser chalal iser. So because of that, whenever there's one avera that has multiple things involved, it could only be the first avera because ain iser chalal iser. Right? If you hold there's exceptions to the rule of ain iser chalal iser, like an iser chomer or an iser koil, well then you have ways for there to be two isurim. But if you hold that ain iser chalal iser, then it's really the first issue that occurred. So Tanya, we learned, Amar Rabbi Yosy nidain bezika rishayim. What happens if haba alav chamoisai? What happened? Bezika rishayim haba alav kama. It's the first aver that you encounter. What if it's chamoisai? So what happened is he married a woman, and her mother was a widow, so she was a single woman. As soon as he marries her, as soon as he marries the daughter, now this woman becomes oshetim with a chiv shreifa, because she's now his mother. After he married his wife, his mother-in-law remarried. Now there's a new Isser of Chenek, so the law is Nidoin b'chamoisai. And that everybody holds. Rabbi Yosy had the Chum, because chamoisai is also the more severe punishment, it's Shreifa, but it's also the first Isser that came out. What about Eishishish, the Nasas chamoisai? What if when he married his wife, his mother-in-law was married? So therefore, she was Oshertim prior to his marriage, because she was also al Neshishish. The question is, will you say the second Isser is Chalanim? Rabbi Yosy holds only the first Isser. So it seems like Rabbi Yosy would say that there would be Chemek and not Shreifa, right? Because it's the first Isser. But the halacha is Nidain Be'eshishish. So that's what Rabbi Yosy holds. It's Nidain Be'eshishish. Why? Because he holds an Isser Chalal Isser, and the Isser Chamoisei was not Chalal. Amalei Rav Ada.
In both these cases, when the Bia happened,
she was both. Correct. The question is, was the Isser Chal, was the second Isser Chal on the first Isser? So Amalei Rav Ada bar Aval Rav. Let's look at this more closely. Chamoisai v'nasas eishishish. The halacha is nidei b'chamoisai. She only gets shreifa. Frank the Gemara, Lido Nami Isser Eshishi. Why don't you say Isser? I with one exception. There's an exception where Rabbi Yosi says Isser Chalal Isser, and that's by Isser Moisef. The Amar Bavo Moed Rabbi Yosi Isser Moisef. What is Isser Moisef? When this lady becomes an Eshish, she doesn't only become usher to her son-in-law, she now becomes usher to every man in the world. So if the Isser applies to everybody in the world, so Agav that it's Chal on her to answer her to everybody in the world, it'll also be Chal on her son-in-law as well. So therefore, they'll be both over here. So the question was, Ravo asked, since Rabbi Yosi is Moed by Yosy Moisef, if that's the case, so Rabbi Ada Barava asked Rava, why is it that he doesn't get Chenek as well? Zog to Gemara, Omer lei Adabari, my dear child, betray Katli Katlasley. He could only get killed once, unless he's a cat. He doesn't have 9 lives, right? So if he only can get killed once, and he has a chiyuv of chenek, and he has a chiyuv of streifa, you can't give him chenek if you give him streifa. You can't do both. But the shaila really was, in 2 cases. What if he never got a sra for the streifa? He only got a sra for the chenek. Would you give him the chenek? If you hold ein yisur chalal isur in this case, then there is no yisur chenek, right? But if you hold the yesh yisur chalal isur, then there would be a yisur chenek.
Go back to my point that we just learned about whether or not you have to give Asra on the specific reason.
No, what if there's no asra at all? What if there's no asra at all? For sure you need asra. What if there's no asra at all on the fact that there was chamoisha, there was only asra that she's an eshish? The Edom said, don't live with her because she's an eshish. They never said anything about chamoisha. Or another case, what if it was shogig? How many kabbanis do you bring? So Rabbi is saying, so technically they're both chal, but you can't kill someone twice. But if it was b'shogig, in fact, he would bring 2 kabbanis chatas. Zok to Gemara weiter. A couple of weeks ago, but at Seyel Amad, Rabbi Hirschman spoke. And Rabbi Hirschman said, there is no such thing as a jail sentence in Yiddishkeit. The only time in the Torah you find someone gets locked up is if he beats somebody up and the person's dying, and we don't know if the person is going to survive or not. If the person dies, then in fact, this fellow will be charged for murder. So you lock him up only till things get clarified. You need to take him into custody. But there's no such thing as jail sentence rehabilitation. Rather, someone who's a bad guy, you kill him. And we're going to see, it seems like it's extrajudicial misa, but it's not. It's a halacha l'moish Sinai. We know how rare it is for someone to ever be chayiv a misas bezin, because you always have to warn him, if you do this act, you're going to be chayiv skila. And he has to respond, I don't care, I'm happy to be mechayiv skila, I want to do it. If he ignores you, there's no chayiv. So kamat, there's never going to be a misas bezin, right? The Gemara said 1 in 70 was unusually high, right? But there was a lot of bad guys, and we killed them. And now we're going to see how we killed him. Misha Laka. You don't lock him up to rehabilitate him. The guy who's bad, he's killed, right? And that's what the person was referring to. Misha Laka Vishana. You know what they do with him? Bezdin. So he got Malchus for an Avera, and he did Avera again. So the Rashi explains, he did Avera again, he got Malchus a second time. And the third time he does it, Bezdin Machnisin Oisha Lakipa. They take him into a kippah, into a sealed room, and we're going to get details of how this worked. They fed him barley until his belly exploded, and we're going to see how that worked. Zok to Gemara, mishum de laka v'shana bezdin kaisen shel kippah. He was over a lav. Okay, so he's over a lav and he got malchus, and then he's over another lav and he got malchus again. So if he's over a lav, you're going to kill him. I mean, isn't that a little bit Taliban? That kills him. That's a death sentence, and we're going to soon see that's a worse death sentence than skilus rev herik v'chenek, because it's a long, drawn out, painful death. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. You know what type of malchus we're talking about? We're not talking about a regular lav. The halacha is if someone did something that would be mechayiv and kares, and he was warned, if you do this, we're going to give you malchus. The halacha is Bezin can give him malchus, and that patters him from the chorus. So we're talking about a fellow who was over a chayv krisus, and he was warned 2 times not to do it, and he got malchus for it twice. The third time he does it, you'll kill him. Why? Because really the Gaber Barkatol, really this man is chayv chorus. The problem is chorus doesn't happen right away. Chorus takes a while to happen. His death is not going to come soon. It can come in 20 years. But the kivun the kamavater la nafshe, since Rashi is mavater nafshe means the mafkir atzmi laveris. He's mafkir himself. He doesn't care. He does a various. He doesn't care. Therefore, mekarvinin le lekatle iluya. We bring his death much closer. But we're going to see this is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that this is what we do, and this is what happens probably more often than not, because I bet when they warn a guy, if you do this on your Chal Shabbos, you're going to get killed, and if we don't have good edis, or if you're not makabel dasra, we're going to put you into the kippah. So you know what? I'd rather be killed with skila because the kippah was pretty bad. Okay, so that's what they did. Amalei, Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachliv. This is actually a very interesting story about this with Malchus. Rashi seems to say that Shel Krisos, it's a lav sheish bekars, the history boy Malchus. Since they gave him hasra for Malchus, you can give him Malchus. This is one of the arguments in a very bitter machloikis, a very famous machloikis that occurred in Klal Yisrael, and it happened in the 1500s, right before the Beis Yosef. There was a big problem right before the time of the Beis Yosef, because that was years after the Inquisition. And the Inquisition, they said that anybody who's a Jew must leave the country. That was a terrible nisoyin. There were some very wealthy people, and they didn't want to walk away with the shirt on their back because they had to leave everything there. Yet there was a big amount of the Sfardim that were moist nefesh. They gave up everything, and they literally left Spain with the shirts on their back. They went to Holland, and they made kehillas. And they looked down at the people who couldn't be Amid bin Nisayin and were going to try to keep Yiddishkeit in secrecy. But they're not going to be able to go to mikveh. They'll have a krisos. They'll do shchita. But they decided that they're going to do whatever they could. They were very down. They were looked very down upon. I mean, you're a Yid and you're giving up your Yiddishkeit because you don't want to give up your wealth. Then what happened is these Moranos, one by one, started trickling out of there because it wasn't working out so well for them. So what happens? They travel to Holland. They want to join their community, and they walk into the Bismarck. They sit over noon. They said, "You're going to sit over noon? What do you think you are? You're Machal Shabbos. Get out of here." They actually had to make separate kehillas in Holland for those Sfardim who were Moranos. And as a matter of fact, there are many Sfardim that have a suffix to the name Samachtes, which stands for Svaradi Tahar. And they were Sfardim that didn't succumb to the Nisoyim. And they looked down upon the Moranos. Marcus Lehman makes them seem so wonderful, right? But because of his stories. But in fact, they were looked very down upon. So imagine you have somebody, for the last 20 years, he was being boiled as a wife, who was Anida, and he was eating tarfis. He's a chayav kares. So now I got out to Holland, and what, I should be a Shem with Torah mitzvahs? I'm nichras, my neshama is nichras b'v'zeh. So people didn't have a cheshek to become Yidden, to come back. So they decided that we know the halacha is if someone's chayav kares, and they gave him malchus, it could pater the kares. So they figured we can't give malchus anymore because we don't have a bezin, because we don't have musmachim anymore. But there was a dik from the Rambam that says besides having a direct lineage from Moshe, the uninterrupted chain, which was interrupted at that point, there's another way to start the smicha again, and that is if Roiv Chachmei Yisrael agree to give one person smicha, he has smicha, now he can give other people smicha. So that's what the Rabbanim in Tzvas at the time, right before the Beis Yosef's time, the Beis Yosef was a recipient, by the way, of this smicha, but the Rabbanim in Tzvas at that time decided this is a great idea. So what they did was, who did they decide to give the first smicha to? Now there were two Rabbanim involved, the Mahar al-Bach and the Maribei Rav. If I remember correctly, the Maribei Rav lived in Yerushalayim. The Mahar al-Bach was one of the Chachamim of Tzfas. I might have mixed it up. It might be exactly the opposite. But between these two Gedolei Olam, the Mahar al-Bach and the Maribei Rav, one of them was Tzfas, and then they gave the other one smicha. So the Rav from Yerushalayim rejected the smicha. He says, first of all, I disagree with the whole premise. I don't think you have Rab Shah in the Rambam. And besides the fact, you're Tzfas, you don't have a right to paskin like that. The main business is in Yerushalayim. We have to paskin. So they said, okay, so you know what? So paskin now. He said, now we can't, because now we're already in the Gebedov. So now we're already disqualified from paskin. And there's a Shiles L'Tshuvas Marabach here in the library that has all the letters that went back and forth. And they got to the point that it was so nasty and personal that the letter stopped. I don't know if the letter stopped or if they don't print those letters anymore. So what happened is one of the tiniest against making smichas bezdin was once you have a bezdin, then you're mechuyev to be mekadosh al piriyah, which would cause a lot of problems not following the calendar. It would be very complicated. It's not like they had communications in those days. That was one major problem. Another thing he says, why are you doing this? You're doing this so that you can give them malchus, part of their courage, and they can feel they can come back to Yiddishkeit. There's no straw. So it wouldn't work anyway. So the whole thing doesn't work. So it's just a spiel. And as it was going back and forth, it got the reference still wanted it so much. I remember what you were when you were younger. You probably tried to do this whole thing so you can get malchus because you know you might be chayv first. And that was the last letter. So it got very, very nasty, this machlokes. But this shaila here that we have here about giving someone malchus who is a chayv krisus with asra is part of the shaila here. So zok to Gemara, Omar le Rabbi Yaakov le Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa. Ta'azbrach. Let me explain to you how this works. It's not just any aveira. That we say that if you do the aveira 3 times, you got malchus 3 times, you're placed in the kippah. That's b'malchus shal karasachas. That's if it's the same aveira over and over again. That shows you're totally disregarding this aveira. You're totally mufkar. That's why they put you in the kippah. What if he ate chaylev and then he was boilanida and then he ate dam? That means isurehu de katam. He's just testing the poo platter of aveiros, but that doesn't mean he's being totally mufka. Such a person would not get put into the kippah. Zok to Gemara, misha loka v'shana. So what exactly happened? Zok to Gemara, shana aval gav shileish. So it's mashma. He did. Let's say he was being boilanida. Before he was boiled the first time, they warned him, if you're going to be boiled, you're going to get malchus. He did it anyway, got malchus. Then the same thing happened. If you're going to be boiled, you get malchus. He was boiled again. So he got malchus twice. Now, the third time, they tell him, if you're going to be boiled, we're going to give you malchus. The third time, if he's boiled, we don't give him malchus. We put him into the kippah. That's what it's mashma. That 2 makes a chazakah. But there happens to be a machlokes if 2 makes a chazakah, or if 3 makes a chazakah. Where is the machlokes? The machlokes is by a woman who becomes an almana. So if a woman is married to a man and her husband dies, and then she marries a second husband, and the second husband dies, the halacha is we don't let her marry a third time, and that's a shita of Rebbe. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says no. It's only if 3 of her husbands die, we don't let her marry the 4th time. I don't recommend anyone try it out to know who is right. No one ever tried it out to see who was right. But Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, only if 3 of her husband dies do we stop her from remarrying. And the Rebbe said only if 2 of her husbands die. So Zok to Gemara, our Mishnah seems to say that 2 is the chazakah. Because on the 3rd time, even though he didn't get malchus the 3rd time, you put him into the kippah. Let's suggest that our Mishnah does not hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who holds a chazakah as 3. Rather, it's like Rebbe who holds a chazakah as 2. The Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, ha'amar atlas imni loy have a chazak. Amar Ravina, Zok Ravina, afilu tema Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Well, you can say that our mission is going like Shimon ben Gamliel, and I'll show you we do have a chazak of 3. Because kasavar averis machsikos. You don't need malchus 3 times. We need to see that he'll do the avera 3 times. He did avera 3 times. So once he did avera the 3rd time, we know he's already a hoax to do averis. We can put him into the kippah. He didn't get malchus the 3rd time. It's not about the malchus. It's about the avera. So you might think to yourself, surely it's about the avera. What does getting malchus have to do with it? So Rashi says that he's not huchzak Rasha until he got malchus 3 times. Tosfos says that you don't need such a lom d'shesvar. It's very simple. If a guy was willing to do it 3 times, knowing that he's getting patched and he's going to do it anyway, that shows he really doesn't care. Zok to Gemara, Meisvei. So Ravina wanted to massage it so that our Mishnah could be going like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and if he did the Avera 3 times, even though he didn't get malchus 3 times, that's enough to be Mechayev. Zok to Gemara. See, I'll push it to Eitzah. What you do is, it's very simple. If he did it 2 times, then you force him to marry a woman who 2 husbands died on her. And if he did it 3 times, then instead of a kippah, he'd let him marry Yismach Shaifa, right? That'll be enough of an onions for him. But Zok to Gemara, Meisvei. Avar Avera, sheyesh ba malchus. What if he was over an Avera that has malchus? And the time. So right now it seems like, yeah, you could say this is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel because it's Avera. But the problem is Abba Shol is another shita. Abba Shol Eimer, af b'shlishis malkanoi. So you give a malchus, it's b'revius kanchanoy shel kippah. So doesn't this clearly show that Abba Shaul is probably the sheet of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and it clearly shows that he holds it the fourth time. Therefore, it would not be consistent with our Mishnah. Everybody else it's the Malchus at the Machzik, to the Rebbe Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, which would indicate that our Mishnah is like Rebbe, not like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel.
Rashi said what he said.
I'm sorry?
Why Rashi said what he said.
Right, that's right. Zakmir loy, love dafka. Really, you could say the Chula Alma is to the Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. You could say Sai Abba Shaul and Sai the Tanakama is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. And you know what the machlokes is between Abba Shaul and the Tanakama is? The Mar Savar Averos Machsikos, Umar Savar Malchus Machsikos. So the first shred of all the Averos Machsikos, the Tanakama is like our Mishnah, and Abba Shaul is not saying that I hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Abba Shaul is saying the Balt you need the three Malchus, then according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel you would need the four. But now we have another Bryce. Vadatanya, history boy Vishosa. They warned him and he was shoisik. Raja shoisik means he understood Azra, but he didn't respond. I want to do it anyway, even though I'm getting Malchus. So we won't be able to give him Malchus. But we definitely know he's amazing. His Rabbi Vishosik and his Rabbi V'herchen Roshoi, which is another way of demonstrating that he understands what's going on. So, yeah. So Pam Rishona Ushnia Masrim Boy. The first and the second, you warn him, don't do it, you're going to get Malchus. Shalishis, you also warn him about Malchus. Rashi says, you also warn him about Malchus, but if he does it, you don't give him Malchus. You put him into jail. Abba Sholaimar, Af B'Shlishis Masrin Boy, B'Revius Kointin Oisel Lakipa. Now here, you can't say that the reason why he does this is because he holds you need three Malchus, because there's no Malchus at all over here. So why in the world would you have to have a Revius? Clearly it's about Avera, and if it's about Avera, you see clearly there's a sheet who holds you have to do it the fourth time.
Why does Abba Shaul have? What happens after the third?
After the third, now he's Chosuk, and the next time he does it, he gets pet.
What happened after that third time?
They gave him Malchus. No, they didn't give him Malchus. No, they did nothing. He gets nothing. He gets nothing because there's Nasra. The Revius comes to Nasra Lakipa. But also Malchus Leka. So you can't say that Pshat is you needed three Malchus because there is no Malchus. So what is going to be the machlokes? You're going to have to say that Reb Shimon argues, Reb Shimon Gamliel argues, this must be Reb Shimon Gamliel, and he holds that you need four times. Zok to Gemara. Well, let's see Rashi over here. Rashi says over here, there is no Rashi on it. I don't see a Rashi on it at all. Because it's Zok to Gemara. So here you're going to have to say that it's a machlokes between Reb Shimon Gamliel and the Tanakama. Zok to Gemara. V'ota Malchus Leka b'may kavivugi. Maravina, you know what the machlokes is? B'kipa shricha hasra kavivugi. If you have to warn him about the kippah. So really, you would have been able to put him into the kippah the third time. But the problem is the third time they only warned him for Malchus. They didn't warn him for kippah. And that's the machlokes. If you hold, you don't have to warn him for kippah. The third time he does an avera, even though you warned him for Malchus, you could still put him into the kippah. Then after he did the third avera, you could put him into the kippah. But if you hold that you have to warn him specifically for the kippah, you didn't do it the third time. And therefore, you have to wait for a fourth time. Okay. So that takes care of the machlokes of Shimon ben Gamliel and their body. Now the Gemara wants to know exactly what is this kippah. Umay kippah. What exactly is it? Amar Yehuda, it's a room that's malay kamosay. Unlike the torture that Hamas puts the hostage through, they can't even stand up full height, which is a torture in and of itself. It was the full height. He was able to stand fully. So Rashi says, "Avada it's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that you kill the fellow with the kippah." But l'maisa, maybe there is some remiss to it in the Torah. Amar Shlokish, yeah, it's in Tehillim. It says to Moshe's Rasha Ra, and we learn that a Rasha, his Ra will kill him. In other words, will kill him even though he's not going to Bezin. The Ra itself, the fact that he's a Rasha itself, allows us to kill him. The Mashal says even more. To Moshe's Rasha Ra, what type of death will a Rasha have? A bad death, meaning he's going to have a lot of tsar too, because this process takes time and it's very painful. It's not chick-chuck. The Amar Shlokish and Zok Mashah, based on his understanding of what Ra means, not everybody learns Zok Mashah. Rashi doesn't say like Mashah. Rashi says to Moshe Rashura, it means he's a bad guy. Bad guys will happen. Bad things will happen to him. But the Mashar reads into it and says it's more than bad things will happen to him. It's a misa that's very painful. It's a misa with tsar. Shlokish, based on that, segueing into that, there's a very interesting pasuk that describes how a person could think everything's good, and then from one second to the next, he's in massive trouble. And it compares this to fish in a net. So I'm going to read the pasuk over here in Kahelis. Kigam lo yeda ha'adam esitoy. A person doesn't know his time. Kadogim shenachazim b'mitzoida, like fish that are trapped in a net, b'mitzoida raw in a bad net. V'chatzipora machuzo is b'pach, and birds that are in their snare. B'pach kahem yukoshim b'nei adam. Similarly, bad people will also be suddenly trapped la'isra, to a very bad time, when it falls on them suddenly. So the Gemara darshans this pasuk. My mitzudara. What is a mitzudara? It's not a net. It's a hook. A fish hook is tiny and small and looks harmless. And the fish doesn't even see it, it bites into it, and suddenly there's a pain in his mouth, and suddenly he's stuck, and he doesn't know what's going to be. So that's what it's like. It literally comes out of nowhere, and you don't know when it's coming, and boom, this invisible thing suddenly becomes a major, major difficulty. That's what happens to a Russian. Zok Gemara weiter. Nefesh shaloi beid. What if somebody killed somebody, and there were no edim? So we can't give him his bezin. We're not letting him walk around. So again, we kill him. You put him into the kippah, and this time they serve him very, very minimal food. So the Gemara is going to ask, I mean, is it a different kippah? How does this kippah work? How does other kippah work? First time we know Yedina. If there was no Eidim, so how do you know that he did it? And you can't say it was an Eid Echad, Rashi says, because an Eid Echad, if an Eid Echad comes and says Yankel killed somebody, he gets petch. You know why? Because he's saying Lashon Hara. Because there's no purpose. There's no constructive purpose for his Lashon Hara. So Amarav, you know what it was? It was Be'edis Miyuchedes. In order for two Eidim to be a pair of Eidim that could condemn someone to death, they have to come as a pair together and have to have seen it and watched it together. Here you had Eidim, each Eid saw it from a different vantage point and didn't necessarily even know about the other Eid. And two individual Eidim came. Now that proves that he did it, but we wouldn't be able to be Mechayev and Misa. Because he's the guy we're talking about that goes to the Kippah. Or Shmuel Amar, Shaloi Basra. There were two Eidim, but they didn't give him Basra. So they know he did it, but he wasn't warned. Remember, Chakiris are mandatory questions that have to be asked because they are the details that allow an aid to be kamuzam. Place, date, and time. So once they knew the place, date, and time, so this is a good set of aidim. But there are those who held you had to ask more questions to try to trip them up. What color was his shirt? What color was his pants? What color was his sock? What type of shoes did he have? And if there's some inconsistency, you could disqualify. So you really know that the guy did it, but something that they might not necessarily pay attention to, that's where he gets caught up. Keditnan, Maisa ubadak ben Zakkai ba'uksateinim. Ben Zakkai was once being badak in Eid, and he says, "Where were you sitting?" He said, "Oh, I was under a tree." Really? What type of tree? Oh, a fig tree. Really? How thick were the stems of the figs on the tree? So it's nitpicking on small things to trip him up. So if you tripped him up that way, and therefore you couldn't kill the guy, you would put him into the kippah.
Where is this in the Torah?
Kippah? Yeah. It's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai. It's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Yeah, that's an important fact, so we should look. Rashi on the third wide line says v'hecher misa. So Rashi vadai halacha l'Moshe Messinai hachonish to kippah. Umil hecher misa mixas. Where do you find some type of remes to it? But about something so significant, we wouldn't learn that a drush of a pasuk in Tehillim. It has to be that it was halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Because look to Gemara weiter.
I thought the earlier Gemara. This is not talking about it was half an Avis.
Right. So this whole concept of if you know someone's guilty, but you can't kill him.
That was above. That's what he did it 1, 2, 3 times. It's maybe a societal,
So it's probably all of the verdicts of kippah.
Rashi said it.
Yeah, that's what Rashi said, but it probably applies to them all. because otherwise Rashi should have asked the question, right? So must all be Allah. So Zok the Gemara, weiter. You feed him very lightly. I don't understand. In this keeper here, the Ketani Noishna Lechem Tsar Umayim Lachat. Umayshna up there, also the Ketani Machil is a sorry, not Shakarsoi, Kreisoi, Misbakaz. On Rab Sheshes, it's actually both. It's a sequence. First, you do what our latest Mishnah says, and then you do what the last Mishnah says. So, Idi v'Idi, in both cases, first, Noishna Lechem Tsar Umayim Lachat, Acha Yuktan Mayonai. You give him gastric bypass surgery, so now his intestines have a very small capacity to contain food, and then you shove him with food. The thing about certain is like popcorn. You eat it and it blows up inside your stomach. So you eat it till you're full, and then it expands and it ruptures his intestines, and then he'll die of septic infection. Okay, not a fun misa, probably a long and painful death. It almost sounds like the Abba Misa's best and are better. Zok more weiter. Hagonyev is a kisva. If someone steals a kisva, what a kisva is, the Gemara is going to tell us, but I'm not going to hold in the secret. It's one of the kelim of the Beis Hamikdash. Which keli it is, we can actually maybe say that the linear strikes again, because in Parshas Truma, the Torah describes that the lechem apanim gets piled up on the shulchan, but they didn't sit one on top of the other. They were on racks, but the racks weren't flat racks. The racks were half pipes. Why? Because we wanted minimal contact with the bread. We wanted as much air to be able to flow around it to avoid it from spoiling. So the kasser were those half pipes that were supporting the lechem upon. We know to be chayiv skila, one has to be mekal shem b'shem, right? Yaka Yosy is Yosy. What if someone said Yaka this koisim? Koisim is someone who does certain activities and then he could tell the future. So what if his name was Christopher? Yaka Christopher as we'll see who it is. So that's what it was. So you can't kill him, but he will also get kippah. Va'boil aramis. I'm sorry, he doesn't get kippah. He gets this misa. Va'boil aramis. Someone who's boil a goiter kanoim poigboy. They get a misa means a kanoi can kill them, must kill them. Now, this only applies b'shas ma'is itself. If he catches them in the act, if he doesn't catch them in the act, then I don't think this halacha applies, but there's a lot of discussion about it. And then there's the discussion of, because they ask, how could if it's a kas, how can you catch a guy punked in the act? So they say it could be, if he's still holding on to the thing, he's still considered in the act. But there's a discussion about that. There's even a shayla if you have to give asra. Did Pinchas give asra to Zimri? I'm not sure, but there's a shayla about that as well. The Mefarshim also say this only applies to a boil aramis for Hesia in front of 10 people. If he's private, then you'd ask the kanoi, what were you doing peeking in there? No, but the private, there's no chiyuv. The chiyuv of kanoi and poigin is only with Barat. Moshe is a very interesting shayla. That's the boil aramis. What about the girl? Does she have a chiyuv misa? She's a goy. She doesn't have to do those. So Moshe says you have to kill her. Why do you have to kill her? Because she's no different than a behema that someone who's reveya. Since that the color came through her, so she's a constant. They'll always say she's the one who he was killed for. So it'll be bezoin, so you kill her. So Dr. Moshe, if that's the case, then maybe her you should be able to kill even later, anytime, because it's al takala, it's not al takanan poigin. So that's the discussion over there. Koyin sheshimesh betum. What if a koyin did avoid the betum? It's a law if you should get malchus, but we don't take him to bezin to get malchus. We take a much more severe measure. What they do is ein echav hakoyhanim avina ishel bezin. They don't take him to bezin to get malchus. Rather, lapirche kahuna, the young koyhanim moitzina is a chus lazar. They take him out of the azara where the chiyuv of tumah is only midrabanan, and they beat him to death. Umaftzin es moichay b'gzirin. They beat him to death. They puncture his brain with rods. Now the Mefarshim tell us why pirchei kahuna. Because if they're going to kill him, they're going to become tamei meis, and they won't be able to do avodah. Pirchei kahuna don't do avodah yet; they're too young. So therefore, they're not going to do avodah anyway. They may be just helping. So we don't mind if they become tamei. Why gzirin, not a sword? Because they had to do it right away. So they would do it with what was readily available. There were rods that were readily available that they could use. And chus lazara is because they don't want them to become tamei in the azara. And this only applies for the people who actually saw him do this. It's not like a chapsim where everyone can join the fight. Only the people that were actually involved. What about a zor sheshimis b'mikdash? If a Yisrael did avoid in the Beis Hamikdash, and the Rishonim say, or a female kohen, who's not allowed to do avodah. Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Chenek, the Chiv is Chenek. Because the pasuk says you must, and we don't know what it means. The pasuk is not specific, so there's a machlokes about it. Okay, gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. Ma kisva, what is this keli kisva? Amar Buddha, it's a klishos. The chaynoimer, it's kasoi sanesach. The heicher means, where do you see a remez that someone who steals a keli from the Beis Hamikdash is liable to the death penalty of k'nem plate? Right? It says, now this is talking about the Levium aren't allowed to look at the kelim in the Beis Hamikdash, so they have to wrap them up in shmatis so that when they're moving it, no one could lay their eyes on them. But it's a remez that if someone swallows the kodesh, meaning he steals it from Mesu, but it's only a remez. That's not really what the pasuk is saying. Now makal b'koisim. So what exactly is makal b'koisim? Tanya b'Yosef yaka koisim as koisim. The koisim, let's say his name is Christopher. Christopher should hit the entity that gives him the koyach to do koisim. Who's the entity that gives him the koyach to do koisim? Your Shlomo. So that's something that will be behind with Misa. There's a shayla in the Rishonim is what were the words that came out of his mouth? Was it Yaka Christopher as koismoi? Or maybe what the Gemara says, he said Yaka Kis koisem as Shemavaya. The Gemara is just saying as koismoi, meaning referring to the Rebbeinu Shalom, but he actually has to say Hashem thing. That's there's a shayla in the Rishonim. So if you're a kanoi and you want to kill a guy, you got to have to ask a shayla. The Ram, Moshe Feinstein speaks about this as well. Moshe Feinstein also says to qualify to be a kanoi, there's nobody who I know that can qualify. You have to be a erlechid, not tzaddik, and the kaddish in the Torah. There's Pinchas was a kanoi, but nobody else. So Rabbanon v'itema Rabba Bar Mori Amri. What they said was he was cursing his friend, and he said, "Christopher should curse you, and not only you, Lakainoi, the one who owns you, meaning the Rebbeinu Shalom, Ulameknoi, and also the Rebbeinu Shalom." So why is Hashem called Koino and Meknoi? Koino is Shu Koinos Olam. So I'm cursing you and your God, and Umekana L'Briyosav, Umakna L'Briyosav is Tuvoi. The Kodesh Baruch Hu also is Makna. He gives the world his wonderful things. So that's what it's referring. What would happen if loy pagu kanoim? What if they didn't? So what happens later? Is he still liable for some type of punishment? Rav couldn't answer Rav Kahana because he forgot what he learned about it. So what happened was Akriyu Rav Kahana b'chalmei. Rav Kahana was told in a dream, and we'll learn the dream tomorrow. It was a whole pasuk, and then he took the dream back to Rav, and Rav deciphered it. The question that the Rishonim ask is, why didn't Rav have the dream? Why did Rav Kahana have to have the dream? So it's brought down that Rav slept. No, I think not the Rishonim. The Ben Yehoyada asked. Rav slept very short, a couple of weeks a night. So they didn't want to give him that dream. He probably didn't even sleep long enough to hear the dream. So they gave it to Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana slept a normal night. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll continue tomorrow. Good tavach, a gebench tavach.
Yitvach Rabbi Yossi.
Good tavach.